Good morning, everyone. My name is Deb Fuster. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Victorian Council of Social Service, VCOSS. Great to have you with us this morning. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respects to elders and ancestors and extend that respect to any First Nations colleagues joining us today. VCOSS conducts its business on sovereign unceded Aboriginal land. One other note before I get underway is that I would like to just note in terms of accessibility, if you require closed captions, you can turn them on within Zoom. If you're not quite sure how to do that, just drop a message in the chat and the VCOSS team will assist you to help you turn on those closed captions. So as I said, welcome to everyone joining us today online. We've had a terrific response to today's session on the Best Start, Best Life reforms. I think we had about 147 registered attendees, many people joining us in real time online, and those who've been caught up with other business. I know we'll review today's recording after the event. So lots of strong interest, shows just how relevant this initiative is to both the early childhood sector and the social and community services sector more broadly. We know that many of the issues that we work on, if we get things right in the early years, we do that great work with children and their families and connect them up to high quality early childhood education and care. It is an absolute game changer. And to this end, the Victorian government is investing $14 billion, that's right, $14 billion, to give Victorian children the best start in life. As I said, we know that participation in early childhood education is one of the most important ways to prevent and disrupt disadvantage. And as many of you will be aware, and we'll talk about this today, 4-year-old kindergarten is transitioning to pre-prep with programs across Victoria, gradually increasing to between 16 and 30 hours of play-based learning per week, led by a qualified teacher. Today's session has been developed in collaboration with the Department of Education as part of VCOSS's long-standing partnership with the department. And really what this partnership is about is that it recognises the community sector's critical role in the development of policy, the delivery of services, and the improvement of education outcomes for all Victorian children and young people, particularly for those experiencing disadvantage. So we're really grateful to the department for all the time and energy that you've put into preparing for today's session. Just a little bit more of housekeeping before I hand over to Department of Education colleagues. Today's session is being recorded, as I mentioned before. That just ensures that people that weren't able to get here that registered get access to the information, and also just enables us to spread the word more broadly beyond people who are registered for today's session. The agenda includes presentations from Luke Bashir, who's the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Kindergarten Expansion. Luke is going to provide shortly an overview of the Best Start, Best Life reforms and the rollout of pre-prep. In particular, Luke is going to provide details around access to pre-prep for children from priority cohorts. And I know that's a really important issue and something that you will want to learn more about today. We're also going to be hearing from Pippa Proctor, who is the Executive Director of Early Learning Practice and Participation. And Pippa's going to talk about process and structural quality in early childhood settings, and also about supporting children at risk of education disadvantage. From there, we'll move into a Q&A, which will be moderated by a team of VCOSS and DE staff. And that's just about ensuring where we've got, some questions that might be similar, we might kind of blend those together and just ensure that we have like some brevity in those questions so we can move as quickly through them and through as many questions as possible. We do have a strong turnout today, as I mentioned earlier, so there's a chance that we won't get to everyone's questions. If that's the case, any outstanding questions that we don't get to, we will take them on notice. We will get back to you. We'll follow up after our meeting. And what we'll do is ensure that not just the person asking the question, but everyone who is registered for this event is able to kind of see the answer to that question after the event. Please submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, not the chat function, and the team will be looking at those and feeding those through to me a little bit later in the session. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to Luke, who has worked so closely not only with VCOSS in his role at the Department of Education, but Luke has a very distinguished career across the Victorian Public Service, so has had a lot of engagement, knows this sector really well in many different previous roles as well. So it's great for Luke to be bringing that expertise to the early childhood education portfolio. So over to you, Luke, and then we'll also hear from Pippa as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much for that intro and generous words, Deb. It's great to be here today. As Deb said, Luke Bosher, work on kindergarten expansion, and here with my colleague, Pippa Proctor. You might know one or both of us from the work that we're doing around early childhood. To kind of give you a sense of how we fit together, the part of early childhood that my team and I work on is really about expanding the size of the kinder system with more infrastructure, more workforce, supporting organisations to grow and deliver more hours in the Best Start, Best Life reforms. And Pippa's part of early childhood is about supporting participation, supporting children from all backgrounds to be able to access kinder, as well as supporting the professional practice side of quality of teaching and quality of services. So hopefully with the two of us here together today, you'll get a good spread of information across the growth of the system and also how we are able to support collectively as a state children to participate in kinder and access really high quality kinder delivery. I'd also like to acknowledge on behalf of Pippa and I that we are also joining from the lands of traditional owners. We're also on Wurundjeri country and would like to pay respects to elders past and present. We'd also like to acknowledge Aboriginal colleagues, educators, early childhood teachers who are on the call with us today and recognise the incredibly important role of Aboriginal educators and teachers for Victoria's children. So in today's presentation, we wanted to give you a bit of an overview of the Best Start, Best Life reforms that Deb mentioned a bit earlier, talk a bit about what's happening in the year ahead, given that these reforms are over a pretty long period of time, and so really wanted to zoom in on what is happening in the year ahead in 2026. And then Pippa will talk a bit about how we are supporting children at risk of educational disadvantage, how we're supporting quality of teaching, quality of service of early childhood. And then I'll talk a bit about the resources and supports that are available. The resources and supports part, we've got a bunch of slides that bring together the range of different tools and resources that are out there that you can access. VCOSS, I understand, will send around this slide pack afterwards, so you'll have access to those materials. So we might skip through some of those towards the end, but you'll get the slide pack and can take that away with you. And just in terms of what we hope you get out of today, I think there's a mix of people on the call, some who early childhood is their bread and butter. Some of you are kinder, teachers, educators, service managers. And for those of you from the early childhood sector, we hope today will kind of reinforce some of the things you might already know about the early childhood system and the rollout of Best Start, Best Life reforms, but we'll also hopefully give you a little bit of new information and also point you in the right direction for some of the resources you might be in need of as you kind of plan for what your service will be doing in 2026 and beyond. Some others on the call are from not the early childhood sector. You're working with children, working with families in a whole range of different services and settings. And we hope that today will give you a better sense of what you can expect from the early childhood system in 2026 and beyond, and how some of these changes that the government's making and services are making can benefit the families that you're working with. So that's kind of what we've had in mind in putting together today's presentation. As Deb said, really encourage questions for anything you'd like clarification on today. Pippa, myself, the team, really happy to get extra questions after today, hear from you directly if there's extra information that you're looking for. So if we kick off with what we're talking about when we talk about Best Start, Best Life, we're kind of talking about 4 significant things that the government is supporting in the reform of the early childhood system. One of them is providing free kinder, which means that families at sessional kinder don't pay any fees at all, and that families that go to long daycare can receive a payment from government to reduce the cost of attending kinder in long daycare. Pre-prep, which is a word that means more hours of 4-year-old kinder. So we're going from 15 hours of 4-year-old kinder up to 30 hours of 4-year-old kinder over the next few years. It includes 3-year-old kinder, which is working towards 15 hours a week for all 3-year-olds, which we are kind of pretty close to being there on for most services and most families across the state now. And also the development of 50 early learning and childcare centres, which are owned and operated by the government. To support those couple of things or those 4 very significant things to come to life, there are also some really significant investments in expanding the workforce, supporting people to become educators and teachers in the early childhood system, and also investment in more infrastructure. So more physical kindergarten spaces for children to learn in. And to give you an example of the kind of scale of that, where next year we'll add about 3,500 extra kindergarten places to the system across the state. So it's a really significant growth in the physical spaces where children are learning. And much of that is in our outer metro growth areas, where we know that there's a huge increase in the number of children living in some of our outer metro growth areas. And so investing to make sure that there are kindergartens that families can access. So they make up the kind of 4 big parts of Best Start, Best Life. And I'll talk a bit about each of those today. On the next slide, probably no one on this call needs to be convinced of the benefit of quality early learning. But just to recap, the reason that we're doing all of this is that more hours of kindergarten give children more opportunities to learn through play. It gives more time for children to deepen their learning. It supports not just literacy and numeracy and skills like that, but also self-regulation and social and emotional skills. And we also know that this is a hugely important social equity measure, that supporting all children with more hours means that children who can benefit the most from that investment will benefit the most. It means that we can reduce some of the structural inequality in our society by supporting children from disadvantaged and vulnerable backgrounds to be able to really get much more parallel to their peers by the time they start school. And not only in starting school, but we know that quality early childhood has benefits throughout the life course. So we know that the benefit of high quality early learning won't just be about their first years in foundation and junior primary school, but really do flow throughout their schooling years, throughout their lives. So we're really motivated, as are many of you on the call, to make this reform a reality for those children where this investment really will have kind of benefits throughout the life course. So in terms of pre-prep and what we're talking about when we talk about pre-prep, we're making a transition from currently 15 hours of 4-year-old kinder through to 30 hours of 4-year-old kinder over time. That rollout is staged geographically, and we'll talk a bit about what that geographic rollout looks like over the next couple of years. But importantly, the rollout also supports particular groups of children across the state to get access to these extra hours sooner. So going back to the social equity point from earlier, we've designed the rollout in a way that makes sure that children who benefit the most get access to these extra hours sooner. And that's a really deliberate, intentional approach to make sure that those children can see the full benefit as soon as possible from these extra hours of early childhood. When we talk about early childhood, we're talking about learning that's led by a qualified teacher, that's guided by the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework. And so what we've got is a very kind of consistent minimum standard of expectations wherever a child's going to kinder, whether they're in a sessional kindergarten service, like a preschool model, whether they're in a long daycare setting that offers childcare and kinder from birth through to 5, whatever setting they're in, there's a common framework, there's a common minimum standard of qualification that the workforce need to have. And so when we're talking about pre-prep, 4-year-old kinder, we're talking about a service offering that is available in a whole range of different settings from a whole range of different providers, but is working to the same curriculum with the same minimum qualifications for the workforce. So let's talk a bit about when this will be available across the state. In some places, it is already available. So in the 6 local government areas that you can see up on the slide here, pre-prep has already rolled out to the full 30 hours. And so this is a relatively small number of kids across the state, but for about 500 children, their services can already offer 30 hours of 4-year-old kinder. There are a number of services that are operating in these areas to the full 30 hours. There are some that are doing 25, some that are doing 22.5. So services are making that a reality by either doing 4 7.5-hour days or 5 6-hour days across the week. So that's where we are today for that small number of areas. It is deliberately a small number to test, to trial, to make sure government's got the settings right, to make sure that we can kind of learn from this rollout. When we look ahead to next year, this is really a big focus of today's webinar. We will kind of dramatically increase the number of children across the state who have access to more hours. So across the rollout areas that you can see up here on the left that are in orange on the map, there's about 3,000 children across those local government areas in 4-year-old kinder who will get access to 20 hours of pre-prep. So we'll go up from 15 to up to 20 hours for young children, 4-year-old kinder in those LGAs. In addition, and probably of most relevance to the group on this call, across the entire state, wherever they live, three particular groups of children will have access to 25 hours of pre-prep from next year. So that's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, children from refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds, and children who have been in contact with the child protection system. For those of you in the kinder system, there are a small number of kids who get access to early start kinder or access to early learning who might not meet one of those criteria, and they will also get access to 25 hours. But predominantly, we're talking about children who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, refugee and asylum seeker, and have had contact with the child protection system. So all of those children from next year can access 25 hours of free kinder. They can access it from those range of providers that deliver kinder, whether it's a sessional model or a long daycare model. And that 25 hours of kinder will go up to 30 hours of kinder in 2028. So if you're working with families who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander or refugee and asylum seeker, or who are in contact with child protection, when you're supporting those families to think about their plans for 2026, when they've got a child that's entering 4-year-old kinder, you can be thinking about up to 25 hours as being the amount of kinder that they can access funded by government. So that's next year. To kind of do a bit of a preview ahead to future years, in 2027, more local government areas will roll out with access to 20 hours. You can see the list up there, and all of this is also available online. And then in 2028, we roll out across another set of local governments. 2 other important things happen in 2028, which is those priority cohort groups we talked about just before move from 25 hours to up to 30 hours, which is the full maximum amount of hours that will be available under this reform. And in addition, all children who they or their family have a concession card or are part of a triplet birth or more will also get access to more hours. So they'll get access to 25 hours. This becomes a really quite large proportion of all children across the state. This is about a quarter of all children across the state will now be eligible for these extra hours. So by the time we get to 2028, every single rural and regional LGA will have access to these extra hours in pre-prep, except for the 3 big cities of Geelong, Ballarat and Bendigo. But everywhere else in regional Victoria will have access to pre-prep hours. And in addition, the priority cohort groups we talked about before and all children with a concession card will have access to more hours. So that becomes a very significant part of the state. And then in the subsequent years through to 2036, that reform then gives more hours to the 3 regional cities and to Metro Melbourne. It does feel like a bit of a complicated rollout. I try child protection, get more hours, and then in 2028, all those families with a concession card also get access to more hours. I've kind of talked about this quite a bit already, but just to kind of put it on a single page in a single place, 2026, those 3 groups up to 25 hours, and then from 2028 up to 30 hours. This doesn't mean that every single service will offer the full maximum hours. What it means is we are making funding available so that services can provide that to those children. And so it will still be up to services exactly what they offer. And so in 2026, they can offer between 16 hours, so 1 hour more than they would currently, between 16 and 25 hours. We certainly encourage services to offer as many hours as they can within that funded range, but it's not our expectation that every single service will be at 25 hours for priority cohorts next year, but there is funding available to make that happen. So different services will have different circumstances. We'll speak about that in just a minute, but we certainly encourage services to offer as many hours as possible. And if you're supporting families to think about services, to choose the right service, you can be asking services for 2026 how many hours of kinder they're planning to offer under pre-prep. And that should be an important part of families' decision-making about which service to go to by understanding how much they'll be able to get access to. And we already talked a bit about the 2028 concession card holder rollout. And as I said before, that will be about 25% of all children. So in terms of how we're making sure that children who most need access to kinder get that access, there are kind of 2 parts. We've spoken a lot about the hours that children will be eligible for, which you can see on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side are what we call the priority of access criteria, which are the way in which children are allocated places in the system. A number of local governments across the state do centralised enrolment. And so you can see here what that priority of access looks like. And so that kind of largely matches up with the access to pre-prep. And as I said, the way the system works, children meet priority of access, and then those in pre-prep priority cohort rollouts will get access to more hours. I mentioned really briefly before that children from priority cohorts will get more hours. That means in many services, only some children will get access to more hours, while others will be still at 15 hours. We've recently published a resource on delivering pre-prep to children in priority cohorts, which can support services to understand the different models and options that they've got. And so really encourage you to look at that if you're a service provider in the kinder system and haven't seen it already. It has a range of examples of how pre-prep can be delivered. And then just finally, I did just want to mention, we do understand that there's a range of challenges that services will have around how they get the right program, how they get the right infrastructure, how we make sure there's a workforce, how we make sure that all children benefit, and some of the complexity of the rollout. Very happy to take questions on any of these. Just wanted to be upfront that we know that this is not an easy reform to do, and we know that there are these range of challenges and have a range of things in place for each of them. So I think we've spoken about most of this already, that from a family perspective, knowing that there's more hours, understanding why that they will benefit from those in terms of those lifelong benefits, knowing that there's going to be differences across the service system, and knowing that for those in long day care, in addition to our free kinder payment, there's also Commonwealth childcare subsidy that they can access. So there's a few things about the rollout overall. And I'm going to hand over to Pippa to talk about access and inclusion.
Thanks, Luke, and hi all. Thanks for making the time today. I'm conscious of time, so I'll whip through relatively quickly, but just to reiterate that the slides will be available and always open to questions, and happy for people to email me or indeed members of my team that you may know. We just wanted to put this up, and I won't talk to it in detail as you can all read it on the slide, but give you a sense of the range of supports currently in place in the system to support children from priority cohorts who may be facing educational disadvantage or risks associated with that. There are a range of programs to address specific needs, and probably the one thing I would call out is the Great School Readiness Funding Program, through which every kindergarten service is provided with resources, either directly or through additional funding, where they can put specialised supports in place to meet the needs of their individual contexts. If you're not across this, really happy to talk to people about that, but a quick Google will definitely help you access our menu and get a sense of the kinds of things that are available alongside the suite of everything else. If I jump to the next one, I think possibly this might be more information that's relevant to many of you in the room who might not be across this, was to give you a sense about what we're doing to improve these supports around our priority cohorts. So we have got a wonderful commitment from government a couple of years ago to do some renovations to our existing programs for children with a disability developmental delay or additional need. So we are expanding our PSFO program, not just alongside the reforms associated with the increased hours, but we are expanding them above that. So that's really exciting, and we know what a valuable resource that preschool field officer program is for our kindergarten workforce, and indeed flowing onto the children and families. We are extending our kindergarten inclusion support specialised equipment program, which provides equipment to enable children who face physical or other barriers associated with their disability developmental delay or additional need from accessing and meaningfully participating in educational programs so they can benefit akin with their peers. And we are doing a power of work to streamline and strengthen our KISS application. We know that there has been many challenges with that over the previous years with the workforce, children and families. And we are doing an enormous amount of work with a contracted provider, Associated Allied Health Alliance Australia, to streamline processes. We will shortly be digitising the form, but indeed helping people navigate that process in a more effective way that reduces the workload burden. We are also, as the slide indicates, doing a whole lot of work, sorry, I'm trying to speak quickly, around researching a revised, reformed service support offer for children who need disability inclusion support. We're trialling a whole range of supports which will inform further advice to government. So that's a super exciting piece of work, and about to kick off with an expression of interest going out to services to be involved in that at the moment. Happy to talk to more people individually about that. I'm jumping very quickly to jump onto my possibly favourite space, but not favourite space in terms of we love one child more than the other, but this is just one of my areas of deep passion, which is very much around the program quality. This slide really reflects a concept and description of quality that was set in place in 2001 through the Starting Strong report at the OECD. So really framing how we consider quality in early childhood education and care across the world. Talks about two elements, structural quality and process quality. Hopefully these will be terms very familiar to all of you. We've done an enormous amount of work in Victoria and nationally through the National Quality Framework around structural quality, around ratios, qualifications, the things on the slide. We're really thinking in Victoria about how we can balance those scales to lean into that question of process quality. So we jump to the next slide. And I will try and power through these pretty quickly. As Luke has already mentioned, the reform offer is a unique opportunity to really genuinely impact the lives of Victoria's children through their engagement with high quality early learning, which must be underpinned by high quality teaching. We are tripling the hours that children can be available in this, which is such a momentous opportunity for us all to hold on to. And words that are often said to me is we have got this great gift of time with these children in this critical period of their development where their brain is creating all of those neural connections which set them up for life. So it's such an exciting space for us to go. We really want to focus in this space around thinking about that intentional serve and return. If you don't know about serve and return, have a Google of it. The Harvard Institute for Child Development does an incredible little set of videos around this, but just that importance of the interactions of adults with children for the benefit of their outcomes is just so important. Jump to the next one. We've done a bit of research within the department about this process quality issue, and this slide really summarises the work that we've done and was certainly underpinned in some documents that we released last year to the sector. And happy for people to reach out if they want copies of those discussion guides. It really highlights 7 key elements that really make a difference for this process quality improvement journey. So I've already mentioned rich interactions, but balancing them with high quality and emotionally supportive learning environments, effective and informed leaders, the importance of high quality professional development. We all know the importance of helping children learn, but it is almost just as important to make sure that we are all continuing to learn in our profession. That's got to be underpinned by incredibly strong subject matter content expertise. So those two go hand in hand. We also know that assessment tools, so that really helps teachers navigate that subject content in an individual context of a child, are critically important to support that reflection and the design of learning programs to advance that learning. That needs to be built on, flowing through the understanding of learning progression, so where children are headed next. And all of this has to be driven by research and evidence, not just now, but into the future. So it's not just about getting a better handle on what the research and evidence tells us now, but how are we leaning in and building that into the future to continue to learn. Next slide. We did some consultation last year, and I should keep your eyes open in the coming couple of months for some new exciting announcements around this space. But when we talked to the sector, these are some of the things that we heard in Victoria that are really opportunities for us to think about when we're looking through this process quality lens. So how we best use the role of the educational leader in terms of being that on-site generator of professional challenge, change and improvement. How do we make sure that in those conversations we are focused on pedagogy, on those interactions between our incredible teaching teams and the children for the benefit of their learning? How those interactions are informed by philosophical and theoretical frameworks, but also anchored in evidence about what we know works in those interactions. We know that time is critical, and we know that ensuring that our incredible teaching teams have access to professional development to continue learning and develop their skills is really critical. I've covered off on the evidence element, and then rounding it out, that we need to be wrapping support around these teaching teams to help them in their practice through things like assessment and helping them build that into their everyday practice so it's not an additional burden that sits on top, that we really see that as part of the process and are supported to do it in that way. Next slide. I will leave you with this, my last slide, and apologies if I've spoken too fast. This just really gives you a sense of our current supports. So I'm hoping that these are things that everyone in the room knows at least most of them, but if not, feel free to use this as a Google list. There's also a link at the bottom which you'll be able to access when you get the slides about the current supports in place. We target them to different areas of the sector, appreciating that we have variable needs across our amazing teaching teams. And as I said, keep your ears to the ground and eyes open over the coming months as we are really pulling all of this work together, and we'll have a lot of exciting things to talk about in terms of how we're going to continue to expand the work that we do to support this important area of quality.
Thanks, Pippa. When we send the slides around, you'll also see in there, there's kind of 8 or so slides with links to other resources like the one that's up on the screen with the early childhood improvement branches, a stack of other links and supports, a stack of resources and other things, translated resources. So that's more a resource to take away that we'll send around for people. So we might leave it there because I know that there are a whole range of questions that have come through that Pippa and I would love to be able to do our best to answer today. So Deb, are we handing it back over to you to ask
Thank
a
you.
bunch of hard
Yeah,
questions?
I'll go through them, and I might just kick off with a question or two of my own as well, and then we'll get through the questions that have come through. And I just want to say, Pippa and Luke, can really hear the passion in your voice, and so we're so fortunate to have two people amongst other colleagues in the department who genuinely are kind of purpose-driven leaders and really want to realise this opportunity for Victoria's children and families. So thank you so much. And Pippa, as a fellow fast talker, I get it. And to me, it's just your passion is coming through. So thank you so much. It's a mammoth agenda, and it's great to see that prioritisation of several cohorts of children that have historically been underserved in our education system, starting with the early years, with early childhood education, with kinder. And I'm just keen to, before we kick off into some of the technical questions about the implementation of the reform agenda, I am keen to dig into a little bit, Luke and Pippa, about how we ensure that those children from those priority cohorts actually do get access. Luke, you talked about the priority of access criteria, but if we kind of take a step back, I guess we also know that we need to build that knowledge about kindergarten, about and the benefits of it, about, trust in services amongst, families that might have historic and for good reasons mistrust of institutions, etc., and social services organisations as well as government. We've got to build that kind of motivation as well for families to take up that offer. I'm wondering if you could just quickly comment on, perhaps some of the strategies that the department is thinking about or already employing to ensure there's that take up, and any kind of thoughts on the role of social and community services organisations to really help drive that knowledge, trust, awareness, confidence in kinder.
I'm happy to jump in. A lot of this work sits in our patch. So thinking about 2026 and indeed the two specific priority cohorts, we have got this incredible program, Koori Kids Shine, that really resonates. It's been designed co-designed with First Nations communities. So we're doing some work to think about how we can refresh that program for our First Nation families and indeed reflect the benefits of reform. But one of the things I think we've done really well for that priority cohort is really ensure that they can see the benefit, and it's really shone through our participation rates. So I think as much as we can all do is to work together in that frame of Koori Kids Shine. In terms of the second priority cohort around children known to child protection, if you haven't heard of that, and I always get it confused because it's so similar to the Best Start, Best Life, but it's Early Start Bright Futures platform. So one of the things we know for these priority families is that it's not about putting the information in their hands. They have complex issues and an enormous amount of pressure on their lives. It's about how we nest and integrate the professionals working with them to know about the incredible opportunities. So that platform is specifically designed for organisations and individuals on this call to help understand the web of services that exist around them, how to navigate them, how to support, so there is no wrong door. So we're really thinking about how we build the capacity of the service system to lean in and support those families and have those really productive conversations about the benefits of early learning, and then help them to engage with our services. All of that said, it rests within those interactions that children and families have when they walk in the door. So it matters about the first conversation you have on the phone call to the central enrolment person, to the first visit you go to the kindergarten, and how you feel about the teacher who talks to you. So we are doing the best to upskill all of those people in the importance of those interactions, to provide them with resources and training to make sure that they have the skills to lean in and make those the most productive conversations with these priority families.
Thank you so much.
And maybe I just add one more other thing
great.
quickly, Deb, just on the third priority cohort group, on the refugee and asylum seeker group and cold families more generally. I think a great partnership between the state and local government are the cold outreach workers, which are not in every local government area, but in a very large number of local government areas. And those cold outreach workers do a great job at coming out and speaking with families directly, with community groups. And so if you're on the call and thinking about how to support culturally and linguistically diverse communities, look up the cold outreach worker that might be in your local government area. They're a great resource to also be able to support engagement with community.
Yeah, great. And I might just add Luke and Pippa as well. I mentioned at the beginning of this information session that there is a genuine partnership between the department and the service system, and that includes the broader kind of social and community services sector. So Pippa and Luke have kind of mentioned some of the strategies that are already being thought about, employed, etc. But in the spirit of kind of partnership and collaboration as well, if there are people on this call today, people in the sector that have insights from other initiatives that you've been involved with, please, via VCOSS, we'll kind of connect you up with the department, because I know that you're always wanting to kind of take on new ideas around how we can make the most of this amazing investment in Best Start, Best Life.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of give a practical example to that, Deb, if there are family service providers on the call who would like someone from the department to come out and have a chat to your workforce, if you're supporting culturally and linguistically diverse families and would find it helpful to have someone from the department come out to a meeting or a forum or an event you're doing, just reach out to us. We're really open to getting those invitations and really keen to do as many of those as we possibly can. So if there's something that we can usefully do in engaging your workforce or your community, just reach out.
Fantastic, thank you. Pippa, in your bit of the presentation, you talked about quality, and I think that's really important because this agenda, it's mammoth, as we've said, and it's not just about improving and ensuring provision and, and increasing kind of take up, but it's also about that quality dimension as well. And there's a question here is, how is government making sure that children out of metro growth areas have access to quality early childhood education?
Really good question. There's a somewhat element of provision to that. So you can't deliver the great teaching without having the building there and the teacher in place. So maybe I'll let Luke start with that, and then I can loop back in terms of the teaching expert.
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier about the government's infrastructure program, which is both a combination of different things. It's building kinders on school sites, it's supporting local governments to build kinder infrastructure and giving grants to not-for-profit providers to build more kinder infrastructure. And so much of that infrastructure program is in 25, 26, 27 is focused on outer metro growth areas. I think we might have kind of 4 kinders next year opening in Casey with I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it will be something like a combined number of 600 places or so across Casey that are opening up next year, similar in Wyndham. So a lot of those are kinders on school sites. And so all of the new schools that we're opening, all those new primary schools in growth areas like Casey, Wyndham, in Geelong, all of those will include a kinder on the school site. And we work with not-for-profit early years manager providers, which are the slightly kind of larger not-for-profit kinder providers, to deliver free kinder on those sites. And that's a really important quality lever. It also means that there's more of a mix of services for families in those areas. As a general rule, that's almost always true. Private long daycare providers aren't able to also build sessional kindergarten buildings. So the only way to have standalone sessional kindergarten for families is through state government supported buildings that are built. So part of the investment strategy for us is making sure there's choice for providers, for families about the provider that they have access to. And there's great quality private long daycare, there's great quality not-for-profit long daycare, and there's great quality sessional. There's great quality across all of them. But part of the infrastructure investment that we're making is so that families have a range of different options on provider and setting to be able to access in outer metro.
And if I think about kind of the getting past the buildings and the bricks and the mortars and actually having the people there thinking about what happens in those interactions, they're obviously able to access all of our existing supports, but I might pull out some of them that I think are most relevant and part of our newer suite. So thinking about services establishing themselves in these spaces, and particularly where they might have more junior staff members who haven't been in the sector for so long. So we have got and released this year an induction supports program, which is targeted to operational leaders, really to help them bring people into the workforce, have a really positive early experience, which we know really sets up that culture of expectation of high expectations for children and them as professionals, and sets them on the best footing. We are working to release an operational leaders training program, which we will be standing up from next year, again, to support those moving into that space, but indeed for existing operational leaders who feel it would be helpful for them to reconnect with some of that best practice advice and evidence. So those are two specific supports. On the early career teachers, we do a host of supports for them, and would encourage people, if you're engaging with early career teachers, to lean into. They're all free. We have specific coaching available through our end-to-end. We have peer connection within those early career cohorts. We have a range of supports about the provisionally registered teacher and supporting them to transition to full registration, which involves a very robust practice program to really anchor how they continue that skill development once they're in the job. And indeed our incredible beginning teacher conferences, which really go to some of the key issues we know are really critical as professionals come out of study and move into that practice, and some of the challenges they face, in giving them really practical tools anchored in evidence to implement in their practice going forward. And as said, we're always open to more. So if there are other bright ideas, we ran an innovation grants program this year for the second time, which genuinely seeds the ideas of the sector. So that's just one of the mechanisms you can use if you've got a great idea, to test it and get it up and running. But again, we're always open to the feedback about what else we can be adding to the suite.
Fantastic. And that strong investment kind of in early career workers, and also just that point as well around like the culture of high expectations, particularly when we're thinking about these priority cohorts who've been traditionally underserved, like often have experienced a lot of stigma. That's one of the reasons that they haven't had kind of that opportunity to have like that experience of, participation in early childhood education in kinder. So that's really fantastic. There's lots of questions coming in, so we'll move through them as quickly as possible. The next question is, we can offer the priority group a 19 and a half hours per week 4-year-old session, or a 32.5 hour a week 4-year-old session. If they choose to participate in the 32.5 hour a week group, can we charge them fees for the additional hours?
So that is a good example of some of the challenges in this rollout around programming, and why we understand that it is really tricky for services to work out, when you've got children with different numbers of hours, how to make that work within your service. So the question you asked, Deb, was really about these kind of two different options that services might have for families. For priority cohort families, they are funded for up to 25 hours of kinder in 2026. And so services can't charge families, sessional kindergarten services can't charge families any fees for any of the hours that form part of the up to 25 hour component. So those hours must be provided to families from priority cohorts as free kinder in sessional kindergarten settings. Where services want to make available to families hours on top of what they're eligible for under the kinder funding system, so anything more than 25 hours for priority cohorts next year, you can give that option to families, and families can choose to take it up to pay for those additional hours. However, it can't be mandatory. It does have to be voluntary for those families to take on those additional hours. So I think maybe what this question is going to is, if they choose to take up the 32.5 hour program, can they be charged for all of the fees between 19.5 and 32.5 hours? I think our answer to that is they have to be provided with free kinder for up to those. If they're taking on 32.5 hours, the 25 hours must be free kinder, and only those hours in addition to 25 hours could be charged to families, and it must be voluntary.
Yep, great. Thank you. So I'm just looking up and down at screens that the questions coming in, so bear with me. Thank you. Next question is that we've been advised that we need to be flexible and support families to meet 25 hours. And what this question is about is saying that from a service perspective, managing completely individual combinations makes the timetable and staffing quite challenging. Can we set a structured timetable offering, for example, 25 hours across certain days, and ask families to choose from those?
let me have a go at answering this. People might want to add more, and there might be a nuance in the question that I'm not kind of picking up. But what we definitely encourage is that services offer as many hours as possible to priority cohort families. That programming model gives the most amount of flexibility that the service and families can possibly kind of manage between the two of them in terms of when families come, so that, because what we're trying to achieve here is that priority cohort families get access to more hours, but will also be able to attend those hours, that the days that they're offered on will work for those families. And we know that's a balance. We know that, there's real service and workforce challenges that people need to work through. And we also know there's challenges for families in their ability to be flexible across all days. So, in general, we encourage the hours offering to be as flexible as possible. Some of the things that we've suggested and support the sector with around rotational models, mixed age groups, are ways that we think will help to achieve that for services and for families, because it does introduce more flexibility as opposed to a more kind of rigid program structure. So I guess my intuitive reaction to that question is about looking at whether rotational models will work for that service rather than just a kind of fixed program model. But I don't know, Pippa, if you have anything else to add?
Just totally echo what Luke was saying. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that change management toolkit, which is where the department has been thinking about this and mapped out a whole range of options, I think that's an incredible resource. It is complex for service providers navigating the range of things that they need to think about in terms of their infrastructure, their workforce, and the children and families. Underlying it all, I think having that conversation with families, every situation will reveal a different dynamic, a different perspective. And I would encourage you to work with your ESIBs if you're finding some challenges in that. The more bright minds brought to these kinds of considerations is the best way to go about it. So yeah, talk to families, have the conversations and work together and bring in expertise when you need it to find a workable solution.
And it's probably not a direct parallel, but if you didn't see the Evening Leadership Series event the week before last, I think you can access that online now or very in the near future. There was a great example on the panel discussion from Mentone Preschool, which is a very small, single room, maybe committee of management run single site service that moved to a 3-group rotational model. And they kind of, I think, spoke really well about how that rotational model took a lot of work to work through with the workforce and families, but it now allows them so much flexibility on when families attend. And I think the person from Mentone Preschool talked really well about how the rotational model solved some of the problems that they were having.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great tip. And also, Luke and Pippa, in terms of resources that we share after this information forum, if that link is now live, we can also just circulate that with material as well. But that sounds like a great kind of practical case study example. Next question is, if 3-year-old children are enrolled in access to early learning or early start kindergarten, will they also be eligible for pre-prep, more hours, joining with the 4-year-olds?
So the context of the child in access to early, so accessing access to early learning doesn't absolutely get them in. But for the ESK kids, it absolutely does. So we would just be looking at the characteristics of each individual child in that program. If you've got concerns or you need advice, please reach out to your ESIBs. They will be the experts to give you tailored advice to your specific circumstances.
And I think the point that we were making in today's presentation was for 3-year-olds currently in early start kinder in 2025, they are eligible for the extra hours as a 4-year-old in 4-year-old kinder in 2026, I think is the context in which we were talking about ESK today.
Thank you so much for that additional clarifying information. This question is around, I guess, just a reflection on some of the kind of media coverage that's been about around, I guess, well, the question is kind of referring to horrific incidents that are being kind of reported in the media. How do we kind of give families like the confidence to be kind of, enrolling their children, sending their children to kindergarten? Is there anything that you can kind of comment on that? Sorry, the question's just moved off my screen a little bit, so I've got the gist of it, I think.
Jo, why don't I say some things that people might want to add?
Got it now. Yeah.
So obviously those media reports have really kind of shone a light on what is an incredibly rare but incredibly also unacceptable set of practices that have occurred in other jurisdictions that also occur in Victoria from time to time. The state government is the regulator for early childhood in Victoria, so we obviously have a really active role in ensuring that services are investigated where those concerns are raised and that regulatory action is taken from a state government perspective. And those examples that have come to light, a lot of those from New South Wales, are examples where conduct was reported to the regulator and the regulator kind of has investigated those. Like, we do have a very comprehensive reporting regime in Victoria and other jurisdictions, and would also reinforce to people on the call, if you want to make complaints, if you need to make complaints and raise regulatory issues, you can do that with the regulator in Victoria. You can also do that in an anonymous way. Like, there's also anonymous reporting. So really want to reinforce to people on the call, where there are things that you need to report, should be reporting. We absolutely encourage you to do that, and you can also do that anonymously. In terms of what this means for families, we also completely understand that this does have an impact on families. It has a bigger impact on families in some communities in particular. And we've heard that feedback from people in the sector. I think the 2 points to make. One is we do have a really comprehensive compliance regime. Minimum standards are very high. Families should have confidence that it's a very regulated sector. Second, I think that the best thing that families can do is get out and visit services, to Pippa's earlier point, like seeing the service, seeing the staff, engaging with the staff. Like, I think the best thing that families can do is get out and meet services and visit the services they're interested in attending. And so really encourage people to do that. We also have some kind of checklist tool guide for families about going out and visiting services, some of the questions they might want to ask, some of the things they might want to look out for. So we'll add that link too in our list of resources that we send around. Pippa?
The flip side to that, I was just going to say, is from a service perspective, welcome them in, show them the incredible work that we do, show them the programs, invite them in to be part of those sessions and see this incredible learning experience that you provide for your children. That centre principle in the VELDF of partnerships with families is something that our sector does incredibly well. So lean into that work. That is what builds confidence, is when parents can see what it is that you do with children every day.
Thank you so much. Now we've got a minute left to go. We haven't gotten to all the questions, but I might just ask 2 questions that are like very simple. I think, a couple of word responses, just so we can squeeze those in, and we'll get to the others out of session. There's a question about, do priority of access criteria apply in long daycare, or is this only for session or kindergarten?
Also applies in long daycare, applies in all settings.
Great. There's a question, will there be a change in the criteria needed to apply for the kindergarten inclusion support funding, the KISS funding?
Really good question. At this point, the criteria remains the same, but that is certainly feedback that we've had from the sector that is informing the work that we're doing around that research project.
Great. And we'll get to there's questions about supporting the independent not-for-profit community management run sessions. There's questions about children with disabilities, preschool field officers. We'll get to all of those questions at a session. Thanks to your team, Pippa and Luke. Thanks again to you for making the time available to come and speak with the sector around the Best Start, Best Life reforms, focus on priority cohorts. A lot happening. Thanks for taking us through it. This is just part of a continuing conversation engagement with the sector to support the implementation of this mammoth agenda, as I've said. Thanks to all of our colleagues behind the scenes who've helped us plan and run this session today. Thanks for everyone who's made their time available, and we will come back to you with answers to questions, recordings of the session, a transcript, etc., and other resources. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Luke and Pippa, and to all our colleagues at VCOSS and DE. Thank you. Have a good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Deb.
Bye. Thank you.